What if I told you that the biggest communication network on this planet isn't the internet? It's not 5G, it's not satellites. It's something you've been stepping on your entire life, something that has been quietly running beneath forests, meadows, and mountains for over 450 million years. We're talking about mycelium, the underground thread-like network of fungi that some scientists now believe operates like a living, decision-making intelligence. And here's where it gets genuinely astonishing. In a single teaspoon of healthy forest soil, there can be up to 8 miles of these microscopic threads. And they are all connected, all communicating, all exchanging resources and information right now, as you watch this. Stay with me, because before this video is over, I'm going to show you how a fungus with no brain solved a maze faster than most animals. I'll show you the compound, oxalic acid, that mycelium uses to literally dissolve rock and extract minerals that trees couldn't access on their own. And I'll show you the research that suggests this network doesn't just transmit signals, it may actually store them. This is the secret language of Earth, and we are only just beginning to learn how to read it. If you're fascinated by the hidden intelligence in nature, hit subscribe and the bell. We go deep on exactly this kind of science every week. Before we go underground, let's make sure we're on the same page about what we're actually talking about. Fungi, the kingdom that includes mushrooms, molds, and yeasts, are not plants. They are not animals. They belong to their own kingdom, and in many ways they are closer to animals than to plants at a genetic level. But what makes fungi truly extraordinary is their body plan. And when you see a mushroom above ground, that's the fruiting body, the equivalent of an apple on a tree. The actual organism lives underground. It's called mycelium, and it's made up of hyphoi, branching, thread-like filaments, that are typically just one cell wide. Each individual hypha is microscopic, but collectively, a single fungal network can cover acres of forest floor. The largest known living organism on Earth is not a whale, not a sequoia. It's a specimen of Armillaria ostoyi, the honey fungus, in the Malheur National Forest in Oregon. It spans approximately 2,385 acres and is estimated to be between 2,000 and 8,000 years old. That's not a metaphor. That is a single connected individual, still alive today. So, when we talk about mycelium intelligence, we're not talking about something small. We're talking about Earth's original internet, ancient, vast, and operating on principles we still don't fully understand. To understand how mycelium communicates, you first have to understand how it's built. Each hypha grows by extending from its tip, a process called apical growth. As it extends, it branches, and those branches branch again and again. The result is a three-dimensional lattice that fills space incredibly efficiently. Mathematically, mycelial networks bear a striking resemblance to scale-free networks, the same topology used in the internet, in neural networks, and in the layout of cosmic galaxy filaments. This is not a coincidence that scientists gloss over. In 2010, a team at the University of Tokyo placed oat flakes at positions corresponding to the major cities around Tokyo and let the slime mold, Physarum polycephalum, not a true fungus but a close analog, grow freely. Within 26 hours, the organism had independently recreated a network nearly identical to Tokyo's actual rail system, optimizing for efficiency, redundancy, and fault tolerance. The engineers designing Tokyo's infrastructure had decades of planning and billions of dollars. The slime mold had oat flakes and no central brain. Think of it this way. Every time mycelium hits a dead end, it reroutes. Every time it finds a nutrient source, it redirects resources toward it. It has no CEO, no command center. And yet the decisions it makes are consistent, adaptive, and remarkably efficient. Communication requires a language, and mycelium has one. The primary mechanism is chemical signaling through small molecules that travel along the hyphal network. When a part of the network encounters stress, a pathogen, a toxin, a drought, it produces signaling compounds that propagate through the connected web. These are sometimes called mycokines, though the term is still evolving in the literature. One well-documented class of signals involves volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Research has shown that certain fungi, Including trichoderma species, release VOCs that actively regulate plant gene expression, switching on stress response genes in plants up to 15 centimeters away without any physical contact. But the real sophistication is in electrical signaling. In a landmark 2022 paper published in the journal Royal Society Open Science, Andrew Adamatsky at the University of the West of England placed electrodes into the mycelium of 4 different fungal species: ghost fungi, enoki, king stropharia, and split-gill fungi. What he recorded were electrical spikes, action potentials, propagating through the mycelium in wave-like patterns. The spikes came in clusters, and the clusters showed statistical patterns resembling human language at the level of word distribution. To be precise, Adamatsky calculated that mycelium uses up to 50 distinct spiking patterns, which he compared to the vocabulary size of some human languages. He was careful not to claim that fungi are talking in any conscious sense, but the architecture of the signaling, distinct patterns propagating directionally, varying in frequency and amplitude, is functionally analogous to what neurons do in animal brains. Think of it as Morse code carved into rock over 450 million years of evolutionary pressure. It doesn't need to be conscious to be communication. It just needs to convey information reliably, and it does. This is the section that most people have heard something about, but the reality is considerably more complex and more interesting than the headline version. The term Wood Wide Web was coined in a 1997 Nature paper by Suzanne Simard and colleagues, who demonstrated that carbon moved from birch trees into fir trees via underground mycorrhizal networks. And mycorrhizal fungi, from the Greek mykes, meaning fungus, and rhiza, meaning root, form symbiotic associations with the roots of approximately 90% of all land plant species. The deal works like this. The plant provides the fungus with sugars produced through photosynthesis, typically between 10 and 30% of the plant's entire carbon output. In return, the fungus dramatically extends the plant's effective root system, delivering water and key minerals, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen, that the plant's own roots cannot access. But here's what takes it beyond simple trade. Studies have shown that carbon and nitrogen don't just flow between trees and their direct fungal partners. They flow between trees. Healthy mature trees, what Simard calls mother trees, have been shown to preferentially route more carbon to seedlings that are their own kin, compared to unrelated seedlings of the same species. Not the fungal network is the conduit. A 2010 study by Simard's group showed that when a Douglas fir was shaded, stressed and carbon limited, the neighboring birch increased its carbon transfer to that fir through the shared network. It's not random, it's directional, and the direction is toward need. This doesn't require us to believe trees are conscious, or that fungi have intentions. No, what it requires us to accept is something almost more profound, that ecological generosity, resource transfer from the resource-rich to the resource-poor, can emerge from purely chemical and physical processes, without any central coordinator. The network makes altruism automatic. This is where we have to be very careful with language, and also where the science gets genuinely exciting. In 2021, a team at the CNRS in France published a study showing that Physarum polycephalum, the slime mold that reconstructed the Tokyo rail system, can habituate. Habituation is the simplest form of learning. You repeatedly expose an organism to a harmless stimulus, and over time, it stops reacting to it. In the experiment, the slime mold was given bridges containing quinine or caffeine, substances it normally avoids. Initially, the organism would not cross, but after repeated exposure, it learned that the substance, though unpleasant, was not lethal, and it crossed. The learned behavior persisted for hours, and remarkably, when two habituated organisms were fused together, the naive organism acquired the learned behavior from the experienced one, even without having been exposed to the stimulus itself. Information had transferred, through the network, between two organisms that were previously separate. Now, true fungi are not slime molds. They are physiologically distinct, but the underlying principle, distributed information storage through network topology, applies to mycelium as well. The structure of the network itself encodes past events, where branches have grown thick from heavy use, where pathways have been reinforced by repeated nutrient flow. This is physical memory, not neurons, not synapses, but memory nonetheless. I think of it as the difference between a written language and a landscape shaped by rivers. The river doesn't remember the rain that carved it, but you can read its history in every bend and channel. We're exactly halfway through this story. And the next section is where everything you just heard gets applied to medicine, technology, and the survival of entire ecosystems. Don't go anywhere. Let's go back to the maze. In 2000, Toshiyuki Nakagaki and his colleagues at Hokkaido University placed a single blob of Physarum polycephalum at the entrance of a maze and put food at the exit. The organism explored the entire maze simultaneously, sending threads through every corridor. As dead ends were discovered, those branches were abandoned. Resources were redirected toward the successful pathway. Within 4 hours, the organism had found the shortest route through the maze. Then, when the experiment was repeated with 2 food sources instead of 1, the slime mold connected them via the shortest possible route, and then built in redundancy, a second pathway, slightly longer, as a backup route in case the primary was disrupted. It wasn't optimizing for shortest path. It was optimizing for shortest path with fault tolerance, which is exactly what human engineers designing robust networks try to do. The mechanism here isn't mysterious. As a branch succeeds, finds food, flows nutrients, it physically thickens. The thicker tubes offer less resistance, so more flow is directed through them, which makes them thicker still. Failed branches thin and eventually retract. It's a physical feedback loop that solves optimization problems in real time. What's remarkable is that this same basic mechanism, local feedback producing globally optimal outcomes, is the same principle behind neural networks and artificial intelligence. The difference is that mycelium was running this algorithm hundreds of millions of years before we thought to write it down. Here's the deep context that often gets lost in popular coverage of this topic. Mycorrhizal fungi first formed associations with land plants approximately 450 to 470 million years ago. This is documented in the fossil record through fossilized structures called arbuscular mycorrhizae found in the Rhynie Chert, a geological deposit in Scotland dated to the early Devonian period. At this time, the land was largely bare rock, no soil, no trees, no complex ecosystems. The colonization of land by plants, arguably one of the most consequential events in the history of life on Earth, almost certainly happened in partnership with fungi. The fungi provided minerals and water. The plants provided carbon. Together, they built the soil that every land ecosystem since has depended on. The key mechanism here involves oxalic acid. Mycorrhizal fungi secrete oxalic acid, which reacts with minerals in rock, particularly phosphate-containing minerals like apatite, breaking them down and making the phosphorus biologically available. This process, called biological weathering, is one of the primary mechanisms by which soil is created from bare rock. Phosphorus is not just another mineral. It is fundamental to every living cell. It's the backbone of DNA, the P in ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the universal energy currency of life. Without fungal networks dissolving rock and liberating phosphorus, the terrestrial food chains we depend on likely could not have developed at the scale they did. We owe the very ground we stand on, in a very real chemical sense, to fungi. One of the most practically significant applications of mycorrhizal and saprophytic fungal networks is bioremediation, the use of living organisms to break down environmental pollutants. The mycologist Paul Stamets, whose work with various mushroom species has brought fungi to mainstream attention, has documented multiple case studies showing that mycelium can degrade petroleum hydrocarbons, heavy metals, and even some persistent organic pollutants. In one well-documented trial, an contaminated soil pile treated with oyster mushroom mycelium, Pleurotus austriatus, showed an 89% reduction in polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, compounds found in diesel and crude oil, over 4 weeks. The control pile, treated with bacteria and other standard bioremediation agents, showed minimal change. The mechanism involves enzymes called lacases and peroxidases, which fungi use to break down lignin, the structural polymer in wood. These same enzymes happen to be highly effective at cleaving the carbon-carbon bonds in many industrial toxins. More recently, research from Utrecht University and other institutions has explored fungal networks as potential tools for extracting heavy metals from contaminated soil, a process called mycoremediation. Certain fungi accumulate copper, zinc, cadmium, and lead in their fruiting bodies, effectively concentrating and removing them from the soil with each harvest. This is not fringe science. The European Union has funded multiple mycoremediation research programs. The U.S. Army has explored fungal networks for battlefield soil remediation. And in several documented case studies, fungal networks outperformed synthetic chemical treatments at a fraction of the cost. Think of it as the Earth's original cleanup crew, a technology that evolved to process dead matter, rerouted by evolution to process our mess too. The Wood Wide Web is not a utopia. Mycelial networks are also sites of fierce competition. Fungi compete with other fungi, with bacteria, with nematodes, and with insect larvae. And they have evolved sophisticated chemical arsenals to win these wars. Many of our most important antibiotics were originally discovered as fungal weapons. Penicillin, isolated from Penicillium notatum by Alexander Fleming in 1928, is a compound the mold uses to kill competing bacteria. Cyclosporin, the immunosuppressant that makes organ transplants possible, is produced by Tolipocladium inflatum, a soil fungus. Lovastatin, one of the first statin drugs used to treat cardiovascular disease, was isolated from Aspergillus terreus. But the most sophisticated fungal defense systems operate at the network level. When a pathogen invades one part of a mycorrhizal network, the signal, chemical or electrical, propagates through connected hyphae. Distant parts of the network, not yet in contact with the pathogen, begin producing antifungal compounds preemptively. They prepare before the attack arrives. In forest ecosystems, this has measurable consequences. Studies from ectomycorrhizal research groups showed that trees connected to intact mycorrhizal networks had significantly lower rates of root pathogen infection compared to isolated trees, not because the fungi killed all pathogens, but because the network maintained a standing chemical immune system across the entire connected community. The immune system of a forest is not located in any single tree. It lives in the network between them. It would be dishonest to end this video without acknowledging how much remains genuinely unknown. The electrical signaling Adamatsky documented is real, but its precise function is not yet established. It may carry resource allocation instructions. It may be a byproduct of metabolic activity. It may do both. We don't know. Simard's work on mother trees and kin recognition has been replicated in some studies and challenged in others. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Nature Ecology and Evolution examined 26 studies of mycorrhizal networks and found that carbon transfer between plants through networks was real, but that the evidence for intentional or kin preferential transfer was inconsistent across species and conditions. The authors urge caution about overstating the altruism narrative. This doesn't invalidate the science. It means the science is alive, contested, refined, and still being built. What is not disputed is this: mycorrhizal networks exist at enormous scale. They mediate the flow of carbon and nutrients between plants. They respond dynamically to environmental stress, and they have been doing so for nearly 500 million years. The details of their intelligence are still being argued. The fact of their ecological centrality is not. We have mapped perhaps 10% of the estimated 2.2 to 3.8 million fungal species on Earth. We have characterized the biochemistry of a fraction of those. The language of mycelium is real. We have barely learned the alphabet. Let's bring it back to where we started. Beneath your feet right now, in your garden, in the park, in the forest, there is a network that is older than trees. A network built by organisms that have no brain, no nervous system, no eyes, and no language we can directly read. And yet it solves optimization problems. It transfers resources toward need. It prepares defenses before threats arrive. It may store information in its very structure. We discovered the internet in the 1960s. Mycelium built its version in the Devonian. Today you learned about the electrical vocabulary of mycelium, up to 50 distinct spiking patterns that function like words. You learned about the oxalic acid mechanism that quite literally built the soil beneath every ecosystem on land. You learned about the maze-solving algorithm that predates artificial intelligence by 450 million years. You learned about the underground immune system that protects entire forests. And you learned about the edges of the map, the places where science is still being written. The most extraordinary thing about all of this? We almost missed it entirely. For most of scientific history, fungi were treated as background organisms, decomposers, pathogens, curiosities. It took molecular genetics, long-term ecological field studies, and a handful of genuinely obsessive scientists to reveal what was always there. The biggest communication network on this planet was never the internet. It just took us this long to notice. Drop a comment below. What surprised you most about this? Was it the electrical signaling, the ancient age of these networks? The maze solving? Let me know. I read every single one. And if you want to go deeper on the science of fungi, there's a video right here that covers the specific medicinal compounds in the most studied species. I'll see you there.